back with another review. This time I have the Olight M2R Warrior Pro in for testing. This was sent in via Ruyu and Bantac. They are a dealer for Olight torches. I'm going to scan over the specs quickly and go into a bit more detail later on. There are quite a few changes with this particular model. The most obvious one is the larger capacity 21700 cell, but I'll cover that in a bit more detail shortly. Packaging on this very similar to the other Olight torches I've looked at. It's much more eco-friendly and easier to get into the box. I quite like the Olight holster because it's a bit different from other makers. It's also well padded and it is fairly compact in size. It's not one of those bulky neoprene ones, so it doesn't take up too much space. Other than a slight increase over the previous version in size, it's basically the same holster. They've added the blue tab on the side instead of the darker colour on the original. There's your felt lining on the inside, and you do have poppers on the top and bottom. That means that water will be let out if it ever gets into the holster. I've listed out the dimensions on the screen for you and the original Warrior. There are some other differences apart from the slight increase in size. The ridges on the side are now more raised on this version compared to the original one. So that is one potential improvement. It's a bit more grippy versus the original. You also have a much more aggressive bezel on the top, and that wasn't really something that bothered me on the other version, but it is worth taking note of that. On the base and tail cap, some more changes here. They've put raised points around the edges and lifted up the switch, so it's a little bit easier to get to, but there is a downside to that as it's not as stable on a flat surface. Olight don't specify the LED with this, but at the moment it's just available in a neutral white version, and they have gone with the TIR reflector, an optical lens on the front, so the beam pattern is definitely going to be quite different on this light. Unscrewing the torch, you'll see the contact point at the bottom, and then we'll take the battery out. This is again one of their customized 21700 cells, and I've already kind of mentioned about this in previous videos. I'm not a big fan of custom batteries myself. I'm not exactly sure why they're going down this road. I think it's perhaps to boost sales on the batteries. There's your contacts on the inside. Now the big news with this is I did try other batteries and I didn't have any luck at all, even with spacers, getting the light to work. So you cannot use other batteries with this, just the custom battery that comes with it. And if you need another one, you'll have to buy an Olight one. Compared to the original Warrior, that is a big disadvantage in my books because I have a lot of batteries around and I just can't use them with this light. You have your LED built into the side switch, which is a soft rubber material, and you've got your 4-stage on the battery level indicator, pretty much standard for the Olight lights that I've looked at recently. Inside the box you do get a wrist strap, standard Olight affair, and you have the pin on the end, which makes it a little bit easier just to thread that through the hole. With the user guide, I'll put that on the screen later on so you can get a better look at that rather than just opening it up. And you also have a faster magnetic charger with this torch. That was one of the disadvantages with the previous Olight versions that I looked at. Even the slightly faster one wasn't that much faster, and this one is up to 2 amps in charging speed. I will test that later on. You can see it's marked red on the underside. Ruyu also include a battery case in the bundle, so you can put a spare cell in that if you want to. I will run over the user interface briefly. Same as previous Olight torches on the side switch. Single press on off, push and hold to cycle the power levels. To get to your moonlight mode, you just want to push that in for about a second, and if you continue to push in, that will take you into the lockout mode, which will glow red on the side switch just to let you know it's locked. Get to the turbo, just do a double press on the side switch, and double press again will take you back to your last power level. Triple press on the side switch to get to the strobe. You can single, short or long press it to stop that. UI on the base switch. Now this has 2 modes. The first mode is the default, so you just have your high and turbo. This 2-stage switch is quite easy to feel. You just have to remember it's either a push in and hold, which will give you the momentary, or it's going to be a quick press, which will leave it with the power on. Switching the modes, just push in the base switch and then hit the side switch, and you'll see it alternate between the flashing and the static modes. So once you are in the second mode, you'll have instant access to the strobe and also to the turbo level. Depends which one you prefer. I quite like the strobe mode myself because it gives you quick access to that. Only thing that I would say is that you can't lock the strobe when it's engaged or the turbo when you're in the second mode. Magnetic base on this is not as strong as I would like, and that was a problem on the original Warrior As we've got a larger, heavier torch and a bigger battery, most of the time it won't stay put if you put it in the horizontal position. Just a couple of times I managed to get it to stay in place. However, if you are hanging the torch down off of something, then the magnet is strong enough to hold that in position. One thing that did bother me a bit is the stability on the base. With those raised points, it's just not as stable as the previous version. No problems to report with water resistance on this, and I wouldn't expect to at this price point, or indeed any price point. Charging speeds are pretty good with this. You get up to around about 1.9 amps, but I did notice a couple of issues. The green indicator comes up to let you know it's finished, but it hasn't actually finished. It puts a low charge in, but even with that low charge put into the light, the battery voltage I measured, it was coming off at around about 4.11 to around 4.14. Those are the measurements I was getting off the battery, so it isn't fully charging that. I'm not sure why Olight have done that, but it is mentioned in the user guide. It says 95%. Perhaps they're trying to preserve the battery life. Doesn't make much sense to me. I'd expect a little bit more charge put into the battery with the magnetic charging. One thing I noted with the light, apart from the warmer tint, is that it's very much like a stage spotlight. You get quite a high concentration in the middle, but you don't get as much spread on the outer areas unless you're at the higher levels. At the lower levels you really notice it's a much narrower beam, even compared to some of the tactical lights that I've looked at. Here's a comparison with the Nightcore EC30. You can see a much wider beam pattern on that. Personally, I'd prefer a mixed pattern like this, but I know some people felt the original Warrior didn't have quite enough range with it, so they have addressed that part of it, though you do pay a little bit of a price with that narrower beam at the lower power levels. I'll run some more beam shots now, and I'll give you my final thoughts and conclusion at the end of the video. Got some mixed feelings with this light. A couple of reasons for that. I can see some improvements, particularly with the larger capacity cell. Also, they have made an effort with the charging speeds. They weren't particularly fast on the original Warrior. They've now fixed that issue with a much faster charging rate on this version. On the flip side, they have that custom battery that's back again. The original Warrior, you could just put any of your batteries in there and charge them. You can't even use your own batteries with this light, and that to me is quite a significant disadvantage. Also, it didn't put a full charge into the battery, which is surprising. It's very rare to see that on a light. My personal take on this is I think you're better off with the original Warrior. You can use your own batteries. There isn't a massive difference in terms of the output. You get a bit more range off of this, but I do think at the better price, the original Warrior is a stronger buy overall.